On this bonus edition of Locked On Mets, I will break down the final 10 picks of the draft for the Mets, as well as my top 5 favorite picks from the 2024 class.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, this is a two-part episode of the show today, this being part 2. Part 1 is a trade deadline primer. I break down 10 bats the Mets could pursue at the deadline, so make sure you check out that show after this one if you have not already. All right, let's go through the rest of the Mets draft. Yesterday, I talked about picks 3 through 10. Today, the final day of the draft, we had 11 through 20. The MLB Draft is now only 20 rounds. So, the 11th round pick for the Mets was Nick Rosselli from Binghamton University. You think there was any chance the Mets had some scouts that were able to check him out across his collegiate career when it was right down the road from the AA affiliate of the New York Mets? I'm sure there's some guys that are familiar with that area. And essentially what you're looking at with Rosselli is a utility type player, a guy that brings a lot of energy from the small videos that I was able to find on him. He hit 338 with a 492 on base and a 738 slug in 21 games this year with 8 home runs and 12 doubles. Grew up in New York, so you have a local kid. Could transfer to a bigger program, try to get drafted higher if he really wanted to, but it feels like he'll probably sign with the Mets, and just a guy that you'll keep your eye on. You never know if he can turn into something, but a utility type player will bring a lot of energy, maybe hit for a high average. We'll see if that slug can transfer over. It's not like the Binghamton University is one of the bigger conferences that they're playing. It's a smaller D1 program, but definitely an interesting pick. Round 12, you have Ethan Lantier from Kansas, a 21-year-old reliever who had a 4.54 ERA across 37 and 2/3 innings pitched at Kansas this year, 42 strikeouts. 6'5", probably likely to stay in the pen, but the Mets definitely stocked a lot of those types, big right-handers, to potentially be able to develop their own relievers. Maybe David Stern's feeling that a little bit this year with the lack of relief options in the farm system. So maybe that was a point of priority, just a way to spend some of those picks a little bit further down the draft. All right, speaking of round 13, another pitcher, right-handed, 22-year-old, spent 3 seasons at Oregon. He made 17 starts this year, pitched to a 5.13 ERA. So more of a starting pitcher project. I'm imagining more of a depth guy than someone that would be expected to be some top prospect one day, but you never really know what's going to happen. The Mets clearly like his arsenal to have picked him up despite having less than great success throughout his collegiate career, but a guy that has made 17 starts this past season, so you can build him up potentially quickly, see how he does once he starts hitting professional baseball and how they can maybe develop him. Round 14, this is the most interesting pick of day 3 of the draft. Tanner Witt from Texas. He was once considered a first-round talent from high school to then also after his freshman season at Texas, where he pitched to a sub-3.2 ERA, also had a sub-3.2 ERA playing in the Cape that year. So he was on this trajectory all the way up to being a top draft pick once his name was eventually called. And then he needed Tommy John surgery in 2022. Then he needed a follow-up procedure in 2024. So this is a big gamble when it comes to the health of this pitcher. That's why he fell to the 14th round. But I love taking a shot on upside this deep into the draft. Only pitched 9 1/3 innings this year, allowed 6 runs. You can't even really take what he's done since his Tommy John. But you have a guy that was once a first-round talent. I don't know if they're going to look at him and just say, all right, with the arm wrist, we're just going to keep him in the pen. I think there's a chance that they try to make him a starting pitcher, and he's an absolute project. But if you develop him the right way, there is a chance that this could be a lottery ticket. So I love taking a shot like this. Definitely one of my favorite picks, or probably the favorite pick of day 3 of the draft. Round 15, Owen Woodward, a reliever who spent 1 season in Lubbock Christian, then 2 in Houston, Woodward pitched to a 5.40 ERA this year, so that doesn't jump out. But he had a strikeout per 9 almost at 14, which is really good. Walk per 9 at 1.5. So a lot of strikeouts, not a lot of walks. Strikeout to walk ratio was 9-1 this past season. He also, there's a video that circulated on him. At one point, I don't know exactly, you don't see the beginning of the home run trot in the video, but there was a guy that hit a home run off of him. I think it was a couple years ago. And as he's rounding third, Woodward full-on clotheslines him with a tackle. So maybe there's some football in his past, but definitely an interesting name, probably relief pitcher. But again, strikeout to walks, really good. Round 16, Josh Blum from USC. Love this pick because he was a closer at USC. Had a 1.87 ERA, 10 saves in 33 2/3 innings pitched. Had a whip of 0.86, struck out 12 batters per 9. So again, another potential relief pitcher. The Mets drafted a lot of that in this draft. Round 17, Jacoby Long out of Miami. 4-year college bat, hit over 300 in his last 2 years. So that's pretty good. Maybe a solid feel for the hit tool. Not a lot of power, though. Probably looking at more of a fourth outfielder type if everything breaks right. Round 18, Jace Hampson. This was the second high schooler the Mets drafted. So now here's the interesting thing about Hampson. He was the top-ranked third base prospect out of the state of Washington. That was among high schoolers, obviously. 6th-ranked player overall. With that said, the Mets listed him as a right-handed pitcher. So it seems like they're drafting him to pitch. I don't know if they're going to be able to sign him. He's committed to Oregon, but he touched 94 on the fastball. This might be a guy that gets a little bit extra of the bonus pool money. I'm actually going to explain that a little bit more in the next segment here, how that all works, because I had to read up on it myself today. So we'll talk about that later. But it's interesting that he was ranked so highly as a position player, yet was drafted as a right-handed pitcher, according to the Mets release. So we'll see what happens there. We'll learn a lot more if they actually do sign him. With the high schoolers, especially with the NIL, I talked about this yesterday, chance to maybe make something in college. It seems like there's less and less getting drafted, and getting them to sign just becomes a little bit harder. So we'll see if they're able to get Hampson to sign. 19th round pick, Frank Ellisalt, Nova Southeastern University. That is where my wife is actually getting her master's and also where she works. So I like Ellisalt already. Also, JD Martinez, a alum of NSU. Ellisalt threw 51 innings in 2024, struck out 62 and walked 17. 3.71 ERA, topped out at 94 on the fastball. So an interesting arm, made 4 starts this year. Should be a guy the Mets are able to sign. 20th round, the final pick, Adam Haight. I think that's how you say it, H-A-I-G-H-T. He is a high schooler from Washington, actually the number 1 ranked shortstop in Washington State, 3rd ranked player overall. Now, they draft him, 4 rounds later? 2 rounds later than Jace Hampson, both out of the same state. So the Mets clearly have an area scout there that likes what he's seeing. But here's the thing. He played all over the field, so he could be a utility guy, but might be able to stick a shortstop. There was some thought that he could be a top 100 pick throughout this process, and then he fell all the way to pick 593. That tells you he's probably going to college. Committed to Oregon State. So I don't necessarily expect the Mets to end up having him once the August 1st deadline comes. But what I will say is he could be tied in some respects to Trey Snyder, who the Mets drafted on day 2. So I want to talk about the overslot, underslot process, how that all works, as well as my top 5 favorite picks. So we'll get to all that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online with their easy-to-use website, which is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you can send me a message anytime you have a question, and I can send you inside information like I was sending over information on each of these draft picks as they came in throughout these last couple days. And I got a really good note from an insider. I actually wasn't able to respond to the text. I just looked at it, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, so I didn't want to text somebody that late. But I was mistaken through one of the texts I sent to the insiders where I talked about the slot value on Jacoby Long, the pick in the 17th round. I said easy under slot because I just in my mind was like, oh, 4-year college bat. But I was reminded from the insider, I hope you are listening to the show today, that the top 10 picks of the draft are slotted. And by the way, if you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. But the top 10 picks have a slot value attached to it. So number one pick has a set slot value. I think it's over 10 million, and that goes all the way down throughout. And so that is your pool money that you have to sign all your draft picks. Now, you can use some of that on a pick that's after the 10th round, but from the 11th round on, you can pay any of those guys up to $150,000. Okay, so then it's just a numbers game. So Jacoby Long might not get $150,000 because he's either going to sign with the Mets or he's not going to sign. Now, we'll see what that is if it's even released at whatever point. But let's just say the Mets are trying to sign Jace Hampson or Adam Hott from their high school commitments. They might give them over slot money, even as a pick that's outside of the top 10. Ryan Clifford was an 11th round pick by the Astros that got over slot money. So he got well more than $150,000 to sign with the Astros. So that's sort of how this works. And that brings me to my top 5 favorite picks. And we're going to start with an honorable mention. So it's kind of a top 6, but I need him signed first before I can include him. And that's Trey Snyder. So this was the draft pick the Mets had, the 5th round pick, lone high school pick in the top 10 for the Mets. Missouri High School Gatorade Player of the Year, had a 391 average, hit 7 home runs, 36 RBIs, 22 stolen bases, an OPS over 1,100 during his senior season. Great athlete who is regarded for his defense. So think he'll be able to stick at shortstop, had some of the best exit velocities among the potential high school draft picks. So if they can get him to sign, this will shoot into my top 5, and he's going to get over slot, I would imagine, to be able to sign away from his commitment to Tennessee. But the reason why you draft someone like Adam Hott as your last pick, a guy that, potentially had top 100 value, but is going to be a hard sign, is let's just say you're not getting anywhere with Snyder. Maybe you take that money and you put it over to Hott's way, and maybe you get him to sign. So that's sort of the game that the Mets are going to play here. They have until August 1st to get these guys signed. And as we get to that deadline, at some point, I will do a show sort of breaking down who didn't get signed and the notable ones that did, who got over slot, all that good stuff. But let's now get to my top 5 favorite picks. So we're not including Snyder because I don't know if the Mets are going to be able to sign him, although I lean more towards yes. That's why he got drafted the 5th round. Adam Hott was the 20th round. My number 1 favorite pick, Carson Bench. How are you not going to take the first overall, or not first overall, but the first round pick that the Mets made as the most exciting one? Because he does have a lot of intrigue to him. We've talked about him the last 2 shows. Guy that has 5-tool potential, could be a two-way guy, but probably an outfielder. Really good bat-to-ball skills, really good plate discipline, an ability to tap into more power. Has already started to do that. Needs to continue to lift more. He talked about it himself. He wants to be able to turn on the inside pitch a little bit better. A guy that was teammates in college with Nolan McLean. Those guys are really good friends. Might join up in the minor leagues next year at some point because McLean might take some more time to develop as a lone pitching prospect now, no longer a two-way guy. I love the pick of Carson Bench. I think by the end of this season, when we're going into next year, he's going to be a top 10 prospect in this system. I could see him jumping over someone like Colin Houck, who was a high school first-round pick last year that still has a lot of developing to do. Bench as a college bat coming in, I think he could probably find his way at the back end of the Mets top 10, if not somewhere comfortably between 10 and 15 when those new updated farm system rankings come out. Number 2, I'm just going to be boring, and I'm going to go right back to the 2nd round pick, Jonathan Santucci, because he's the only lefty that the Mets got, and there's hope that he can stick as a starter, and they do not have a prize left-handed pitching prospect in this system right now. He comes from Duke University. I think Santucci was a really interesting pick, guy with a ton of upside, so that is right there. And then I continue to sort of go chalk here with high draft picks, Eli Serrano is one that I would be really excited to see how he's going to develop from NC State. He could go back. He might not be a cut and dry, easy signing. He might get a little bit over his slot value because he does have the ability to go back and maybe play himself from a 4th round pick into being a 2nd round pick where his slot value is going to be that much better. I don't know if you have to pay him 2nd round money, but maybe you meet somewhere in the middle. Serrano was teammates with Ryan Clifford back in high school at their prep academy. Needs to tap into some more power, but he can add on some muscle and do that. He's 6'5", really lanky, was moved from first base to center field at NC State. So that says a lot about his athleticism. I like that pick a lot. So I'd say if you're looking at upside from this class, Benj, Serrano, and Snyder are the 3 position players you should really keep your eye on. Corey Collins, good bat, senior bat from Georgia, but I don't know exactly what his complete upside is. Also, if he's limited to first base, the defensive part of it as a prospect is always going to hamper your value just a little bit. All right, now we got 2 arms. So to close out my top 5 favorite picks from this draft, we go with the guy that I discussed on yesterday's show, 8th round pick, Ryan Lambert. Out of Oklahoma, 21-year-old reliever, had a 2.57 ERA in his 1 season there after transfer from Minnesota. But even more exciting, he pitched in what's now called the MLB Draft League. So it's a 35-game league. I talked about this on yesterday's show. 35-game season that takes place from June 4th to July 13th. So it's just priming guys for the draft. And if you had a great college career, you're not going to compete in this. So you have to take his numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt. But he pitched to a 1.50 ERA in 6 innings in that league, 10 strikeouts, no walks, touched 102 on his fastball. I joked on yesterday's show, get him in the Mets bullpen now, but he has a nasty fastball slider combination, power pitcher. And those guys, sometimes it doesn't really take much to develop them. He has good stuff. You can maybe hope that he can hone in on his control a little bit. Command was an issue in college, but wasn't an issue in the MLB Draft League. No walks, whiff rate over 30% on his fastball. So to me, Ryan Lambert for a team that can desperately use bullpen help. I'm not necessarily saying this year. I mean, they can use it, but I don't think for sure Lambert's going to be part of the equation. He could be up next year, though. So I really love that pick. And then along the same lines as far as an upside play and an arm, but completely different as far as the road, to getting drafted here is Tanner Witt, who we just talked about here. The Mets get him in the 14th round, but at one point, potential first-round talent. If they get anything from Tanner Witt or Matt Allen, it is a benefit. Matt Allen has gone through a lot more now, but these are guys that probably didn't have the best Tommy John surgery, right? Tanner Witt to have gotten TJ in 2022 and to not really be effective on the mound since then. Obviously, he probably wasn't going to pitch in 2023, but to have some type of a follow-up procedure in 24, there's risk here, of course, but to get him in the 14th round and the upside that he possesses, I think that was a fantastic pick, especially at the value that they're getting him at. And I imagine he's going to sign. I don't think you have to go over slot or anything to sign him, and he could go back to school and try to pitch himself into being a higher draft pick. But with the health concern that he already has, you'd imagine he might want to just start his professional career and make his money on the back end if he can end up skyrocketing through prospect lists and make it to the show and have a good big league career. I think his sort of dream of getting a ton of money on a signing bonus probably out the window at this point. So really like that pick as well by the Mets to get a lot of upside in the 14th round. That is my complete breakdown here of what the Mets did in the draft. I hope you all enjoyed it. Like I said, as they start signing guys, I'll probably mention it throughout Friday Farm Reports. We will do a show once you get past the August 1st deadline to sign all these guys, where I will talk about who got signed, who didn't, and all that good stuff. So if you want to make sure that you're not missing any of the prospect content we have here with Locked On Mets, you want to follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Goal is to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7, covering all the latest in the world of sports. You can also find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on Amazon Fire TV.